Loner rancher helped a dying Apache girl, then faced 80 warriors at night. Ethan Ward was a man who lived alone in the wide, open lands of the Southwest. The land was rough and wild, with tall grasses that waved in the wind like the ocean. The sky stretched endlessly above, and the sun could be harsh and bright. This was a place where a person could feel small and yet also feel free. Ethan liked it that way. He had not always been a loner. Once he had lived in a town where people knew his name and where he had shared meals with friends. But years of hard work and disappointment had changed him. He had seen how quickly people could turn their backs when times became difficult. He had watched neighbors argue over small things, and he had heard rumors spread like wildfire. It made him tired, so he moved away. He found a piece of land far from the nearest town. It was not perfect, but it was enough. There was a small stream that ran through it, and there were hills that offered some protection from strong winds. Ethan built a simple cabin with his own hands. He used rough wooden logs and stones he found nearby. The cabin was not fancy, but it was strong. He also built a fence to protect his cattle. The fence was made of wooden posts and barbed wire. It was not meant to keep people out, it was meant to keep the cattle in. The cattle were his life. They were the reason he woke up every morning and worked until the sun went down. He would check on them, feed them, and make sure they were safe. The work was hard, but it was honest. It gave him a sense of purpose. Ethan lived a quiet life. He rarely traveled to town. He did not enjoy the noise or the crowd. He preferred the sound of the wind, the birds, and the quiet night. At night, he would sit by the fireplace, drink a small cup of coffee, and think. He did not talk much. He did not need to. He had his land, his cattle, and his thoughts. Sometimes people in the nearby town would talk about him. They called him strange. They said he was a dangerous man. Some even said he had a dark past. Ethan knew about these rumors, but he did not care. He had learned long ago that people would say anything if they did not understand you. He did not try to explain himself. He simply lived his life. On one hot summer evening, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. He had slept lightly, as if something was calling him. He looked out of his cabin window and saw that the sky was clear and the air was still. The land looked peaceful, but Ethan felt uneasy. He put on his boots and walked outside. The sun was rising slowly, casting a golden light across the land. The cattle were calm, grazing in the field. Everything seemed normal. Ethan checked the fence line. He walked along the posts, looking for any signs of damage. The fence was strong. There was no broken wire. Everything seemed fine. Then, as he walked farther, he noticed something strange. There was a small trail in the dirt leading away from the fence and into a nearby ravine. The trail was narrow and looked like it had been made recently. Ethan followed it. As he moved closer to the ravine, he noticed something else. There was a faint smell in the air, like smoke mixed with dry grass. The smell made him pause. He looked around carefully. He could see the ravine ahead, dark and hidden among rocks and bushes. Ethan's heart began to beat faster. He was not afraid of danger, but he was cautious. He had learned to respect the land and its secrets. He slowed down and continued to follow the trail. The ground was uneven and the rocks were sharp. The sun was high now and the heat made the air feel heavy. As he reached the edge of the ravine, he saw a sight that made his stomach tighten. There was a small figure lying on the ground. It was a girl. She was very young, maybe 14 or 15 years old. She was lying on her side, her face turned toward the sky. Her clothes were dirty and torn, and she looked weak and tired. She was breathing slowly. Ethan approached her carefully. He could see that she was injured. Her face had small cuts, and she was covered in dust. She looked like she had been running for a long time. Her eyes were half open, and she looked confused. Ethan felt something inside him change. He had always been a quiet man, and he had always kept to himself. But when he saw the girl, he felt a sudden need to help. He knew that if he left her there, she might not survive. The land was dangerous, and there was no one nearby to help her. He moved closer and knelt beside her. The girl tried to speak, but her voice was weak. Ethan could not understand what she was saying. He did not speak her language, but he could see her fear. He could see that she was alone. Ethan looked around. The ravine was deep and narrow, and the rocks made it hard to move. There was no way he could carry her out easily. He needed to think fast. He looked at his horse, which was tied nearby. The horse was calm, as if it understood that something was wrong. Ethan gently lifted the girl onto his horse. He moved slowly, careful not to hurt her. The girl winced when he touched her, but she did not resist. She was too weak. Ethan wrapped his coat around her to protect her from the sun. He then climbed onto the horse and rode back toward his cabin. The ride was slow and quiet. The girl's body felt light, but her weight seemed heavy with pain. Ethan could feel her breathing, shallow and weak. He spoke softly to her, even though she could not understand his words. He wanted her to know she was not alone. When they reached the cabin, Ethan carefully helped the girl down from the horse. He carried her inside and laid her on a bed. He brought water and tried to clean her wounds as best as he could. He did not have many supplies, but he had enough to help. He used a clean cloth to wipe the dirt from her face. He found a small bottle of medicine and poured a little into a cup. He offered it to her, but she shook her head. She was scared. Ethan realized she did not trust him. She did not know who he was or why he was helping her. Ethan stayed calm. He understood that trust must be earned. He sat beside her bed and waited. He did not force her to drink. He simply stayed near her, watching her breathing and listening to her small sounds. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky and the room grew darker. The girl's breathing became slightly stronger. She looked at Ethan with tired eyes, as if she was trying to understand him. Ethan gently touched her hand. She flinched at first, but then she relaxed. Ethan thought about what had happened. He wondered how the girl ended up in the ravine. He wondered if she had been lost or if she had been running from something. He wondered if anyone was looking for her. He knew that the land was full of people who traveled through it, and not all of them were friendly. He also thought about his own life. He had chosen to live alone, but he realized that being alone did not mean being heartless. He had always believed that people should take care of themselves, but now he understood that sometimes a person needed help. Sometimes helping someone else could also help you. The girl began to speak again, but her words were unclear. Ethan listened carefully. He could hear a few words that sounded familiar, but he could not understand them. He realized that she might be from a different tribe or group. He had heard stories about the Apache people who lived in the area. He had heard that they were proud and strong. He had also heard that they did not trust outsiders easily. Ethan did not want to scare her. He wanted to show her that he meant no harm. He looked around his cabin for something that could help him communicate. He found a small notebook and pencil. He wrote down a few simple words in English like water, food, and safe. He showed them to the girl. She looked at them for a moment and then pointed to the word water. Ethan nodded and poured her a small cup. The girl drank slowly. She held the cup with both hands as if she was afraid it might disappear. Ethan smiled gently. He wanted her to feel safe. He then brought her a small plate of food. It was simple, but it was warm. She ate a little and then stopped. She looked at Ethan as if she was trying to decide whether she could trust him. Ethan understood. He knew that trust was not something that could be forced. He had to wait. He had to be patient. The night came and the cabin grew quiet. Ethan sat by the fire, watching the girl sleep. He thought about how strange life could be. One moment you were alone and quiet, and the next moment you were caring for someone you had never met. He thought about how the land had brought them together. He thought about how the girl had ended up in the ravine. He could not sleep. He kept thinking about the girl and her situation. He wondered if she had family. He wondered if she was running away from danger. He wondered if she was safe now. In the early morning, the girl woke up. She looked at Ethan and smiled slightly. It was the first time he had seen her smile. Her smile was small, but it was real. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. He realized that he had made a difference. The girl tried to speak again. Ethan listened carefully. This time he heard a few words that sounded like a name. He wrote down a few letters on his notebook and showed them to her. She looked at the letters and nodded. He realized that he had learned her name. Her name was Nina. Ethan repeated her name softly. Nina looked surprised. She had never heard her name spoken by a stranger in such a calm voice. She looked at Ethan with a new kind of trust. It was a small moment, but it felt important. Ethan knew that he could not keep Nina forever. She did not belong to his world. She belonged to her people. He also knew that if her people were looking for her, they might come to his cabin. He was not sure what would happen if they found her there. He did not want to cause trouble. But for now, Nina was alive. She was safe. And Ethan had made a choice that he would not regret. The sun rose higher in the sky, and the land outside began to wake. Ethan stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the wide, open plains. He felt a sense of peace. He had always believed that living alone was the best way to stay safe. But now he realized that being alone did not mean being alone in the world. Nina was still sleeping. Ethan looked at her and thought about the future. He knew that the next days would be difficult. He knew that he would have to make important decisions. He knew that his life was about to change. But for now, he simply stood there watching the land, listening to the wind, and feeling the quiet. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was not truly alone. The morning after Ethan found Nina, the air felt different. The land was still wide and quiet, but the silence now felt like it was filled with something. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Ethan could feel it too. He could feel that something had changed, and he was not sure if it was good or bad. Nina woke up slowly. She looked around the cabin, and her eyes moved from one object to another. Everything seemed strange to her. The cabin was not like the place she had come from. It was small and simple, with wooden walls and a fireplace. There were no bright colors, no decorations, and no familiar sounds. It felt lonely, but it also felt safe. Nina sat up and rubbed her eyes. She looked at Ethan. He was standing near the window, looking outside. When he saw her wake up, he smiled gently. He walked toward her and placed a small bowl of water on the table. Nina looked at the bowl and then looked at Ethan. She did not drink right away. She was still unsure, but Ethan did not rush her. He simply sat down in a chair near her bed and waited. He wanted her to feel calm. After a few minutes, Nina reached for the bowl and drank slowly. She held the bowl with both hands like it was something precious. Ethan watched her carefully. He could see that she was still weak, but she was getting stronger. Nina tried to speak again. Ethan listened. He could not understand her words, but he could understand her tone. She sounded tired, but she also sounded hopeful. Ethan realized that she was trying to tell him something important. He took his notebook and wrote a few words in big letters. Food, water, safe, name. He showed the notebook to Nina. She looked at the words and then looked at Ethan. She pointed at the word name. Ethan nodded. He wrote down a simple question. What is your name? Then he pointed to himself and said, Ethan. He wrote his name in the notebook. Nina looked at the word and then at Ethan. She repeated his name slowly, trying to pronounce it. Ethan, she said. She smiled slightly. Ethan smiled back. Then Nina pointed to herself and said her name. Ethan listened carefully. He wrote down the sound of her name as best as he could. It was not perfect, but it was close. He showed it to her and she nodded. She was pleased. Ethan felt a small relief. He had a name for the girl, and the girl knew his name. It was a small step, but it mattered. It meant that they were beginning to understand each other. After breakfast, Ethan decided to do something important. He needed to know more about Nina's situation. He needed to understand where she came from and why she had been in the ravine. He also needed to know if her people were looking for her. Ethan asked Nina if she could draw a map or show him where she came from. He gave her a piece of paper and a pencil. Nina looked at the paper for a moment, and then she began to draw. She drew a line that looked like a river. She drew some hills. She drew a small group of tents. She drew a few symbols that Ethan did not understand. Ethan watched her draw carefully. He tried to imagine the place she was drawing. It looked like a village near a river with hills around it. Ethan thought about the land he lived on. He knew there were villages of people who lived far away. He also knew that some of those people were not friendly to outsiders. But he did not judge. He simply wanted to know the truth. When Nina finished drawing, she pointed to the river and then pointed to herself. She looked at Ethan and said a word that sounded like home. Ethan understood. He realized that she was trying to tell him that she came from a place near a river and that she had been far from home. Ethan looked at the drawing again. He realized that the place Nina was describing was not close to his ranch. It was far away. It would take days to travel there. He also realized that Nina might not be able to return easily. The land was dangerous and the weather could be harsh. Ethan felt a deep sadness. He thought about how difficult it must be for Nina. She was young, alone, and far from home. He wondered if she had been separated from her family. He wondered if she had been trying to escape something. He wondered if she had been lost. Nina looked at Ethan and then looked down. She seemed to be thinking. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a piece of cloth with a simple pattern. She held it tightly as if it was something she treasured. She showed it to Ethan. Ethan looked at the cloth. He could tell that it was special. It looked like a piece of clothing from her village. He could also tell that it had been kept carefully. He asked Nina if it was important. Nina nodded and then pointed to her heart. Ethan understood. The cloth was a symbol of her family. It was something that reminded her of home. Ethan felt a strong desire to help her keep it safe. He put the cloth in a small box and locked it away in a drawer. He wanted to protect it. As the day went on, Ethan noticed that Nina was becoming more comfortable. She walked around the cabin slowly. She looked out of the window and watched the land. She listened to the sounds of nature. She seemed to be remembering things. Ethan decided to teach Nina some simple words in English. He wrote them in his notebook and showed them to her. He taught her words like water, food, fire, house, and safe. Nina repeated the words carefully. She was a quick learner. Ethan was impressed. Nina also taught Ethan a few words in her language. She taught him the word for thank you and the word for friend. Ethan listened carefully and repeated the words. He felt a connection with her that he had not felt with anyone in a long time. The sun began to set and the sky turned orange. Ethan built a small fire outside the cabin. He cooked a simple meal for Nina and himself. The smell of the food filled the air. Nina ate slowly, but she ate. Ethan watched her with a careful eye. He was relieved that she was eating. After dinner, Ethan and Nina sat near the fire. Ethan looked at her and asked her a question. He pointed to the sky and then pointed to the sun. He made a motion with his hands, like the sun moving across the sky. He wanted to know how long Nina had been traveling. Nina thought for a moment. Then she pointed to the sky and made a motion like walking. She looked at Ethan and said a word that sounded like many. Ethan understood. She had been traveling for many days. He felt a new sense of worry. He wondered what she had been through during those days. Ethan decided that he needed to be honest with Nina. He needed to tell her that he was worried. He told her, using simple words and gestures, that she could stay at his cabin for a while. He told her that he would help her get stronger. He also told her that he would try to help her find her way home. Nina looked at Ethan and smiled. She nodded. She seemed to understand. Ethan felt a sense of relief. He knew that he was not alone in this situation anymore. He had someone to care for. He had someone who trusted him. But the quiet land outside the cabin was not as peaceful as it seemed. Ethan had a feeling that something was coming. He could not explain it, but he could feel it in his bones. He watched the dark line of the hills in the distance. He listened to the sounds of the night. He could hear the wind moving through the grass. He could hear the small noises of animals. Then he heard something else, a faint sound like horses moving in the distance. Ethan stopped breathing for a moment. He listened carefully. The sound was not close, but it was getting closer. He looked at Nina. She looked frightened. Ethan knew that the sound could be a sign that someone was coming. Ethan stood up and walked outside. He looked around the land. The sky was dark, but the stars were bright. He could see the shapes of the hills. He could see the shadows of trees. He could see the faint outline of the trail that led to the ravine. He waited for a few minutes. The sound of horses grew louder. Ethan knew that he needed to be careful. He did not want to scare Nina. He did not want to cause a problem, but he also knew that he had to protect her. Ethan returned to the cabin and told Nina to stay inside. He closed the door and locked it. He took his rifle and stood near the window. He looked out into the darkness, waiting for what would come next. The night grew colder. The sound of horses grew closer. Ethan could feel his heart beating fast. He could feel his body ready for action. He did not know who was coming, but he knew that he had to be ready. Nina sat on the bed, holding her small cloth tightly. She looked at Ethan with worried eyes. Ethan looked back at her and tried to give her a calm look. He wanted her to feel safe. Ethan did not know what the night would bring. He only knew that he had made a choice to help Nina. And now he had to face whatever consequences came with that choice. The night felt heavy and still, like the world was holding its breath. Ethan stood by the window of his cabin, watching the darkness outside. The fire in the hearth had burned low, leaving only small glowing embers. The air inside the cabin was quiet, but Ethan could feel the tension in his body. He listened carefully for any sound. Nina sat on the bed, holding the small cloth she kept close to her. Her eyes were wide and she kept looking toward the door. Ethan could tell that she was scared. He did not blame her. The land outside was unfamiliar to her and she had already been through so much. She had been alone, weak, and injured. Now she was safe, but the feeling of danger was still there. Ethan watched the window. He could see the outline of the hills in the distance. He could see the shadows of trees. The sound of horses was still there, but it was not very loud. It seemed like the riders were moving slowly, as if they were careful not to be seen. Ethan's mind raced. He tried to think of what to do. He knew that the riders could be anyone. They could be travelers passing through, or they could be people looking for Nina. He did not know. He also knew that if they were looking for Nina, they might be angry or worried. They might want to take her back. Ethan did not want to cause trouble. He did not want to start a fight. He wanted to protect Nina and keep her safe. But he also knew that he could not hide forever. He needed to find out who was outside. Ethan slowly moved away from the window and walked to the door. He put his ear against the wood and listened. He could hear the faint sound of voices. He could not understand them, but he could tell that there were several people. They were speaking softly, like they did not want to be heard. Ethan felt a wave of fear. He had never been in a situation like this before. He had always lived alone and quiet. He had never faced a group of people at night. He wondered if he should run away. He wondered if he should hide, but he knew that running would not solve anything. Nina was inside the cabin. He could not leave her alone. Ethan took a deep breath. He picked up his rifle and checked it. He did not want to use it, but he wanted to be prepared. He also grabbed a lantern and walked outside. The air was cold and sharp. The moon was bright and the stars were clear. Ethan stood outside his cabin and looked around. He could see the faint glow of a campfire in the distance. He could see the shadows of people moving near it. He could hear their voices more clearly now. They were speaking in a language Ethan did not know. Ethan walked slowly toward the campfire, keeping his hands visible. He did not want to seem threatening. He wanted to show that he was calm. He moved carefully, making sure not to make sudden movements. As he got closer, he saw a group of people sitting around the fire. There were many of them, maybe 30 or more. They were dressed in traditional clothing, with blankets wrapped around their shoulders. They had horses nearby tied to trees. The firelight made their faces look serious. Ethan stopped at a safe distance. He raised his hands slightly and spoke in a calm voice. "Hello," he said. "I mean no harm." The people around the fire looked up, their eyes focused on Ethan. For a moment, no one spoke. Ethan felt the weight of their gaze. He felt like he was being judged. He felt like he was standing in front of a group of people who had every right to be angry. Then one of the men stood up. He was older, with a calm face and strong eyes. He looked at Ethan and spoke slowly. Ethan could not understand the words, but he could see the meaning in the man's expression. The man was trying to ask Ethan who he was and why he was there. Ethan shook his head and pointed to himself. He said, "Ethan." He then pointed to the cabin and said, "Home." He pointed to Nina's direction and then made a motion like a small person lying down. He was trying to show that someone was inside, injured. The older man watched Ethan carefully. He then pointed to his own chest and said a word that Ethan did not understand. He then pointed to the fire and made a motion like a circle, as if he was saying, "We are a group." Ethan nodded. Ethan realized that the man was trying to say that they were a group of people and that they were together. Ethan felt a new sense of worry. He wondered if they were Nina's people. He wondered if they were her family. He wondered if they had come to take her back. Ethan spoke slowly and clearly. He tried to explain that he had found a girl who was hurt and that he had helped her. He pointed to Nina's direction again and then pointed to himself. He made a motion like a heart to show that he had helped her out of kindness. The older man listened. He looked at Ethan with a serious expression. He seemed to be thinking. Ethan waited. He felt his heart beating fast. He did not know what would happen next. Then the older man spoke again. He pointed to the cabin and then pointed to the girl. He then made a motion like walking. Ethan understood. The man was asking Ethan to bring Nina out to meet them. He wanted to see her. Ethan hesitated. He did not know if it was safe. He did not know if the group would be angry. But he also knew that hiding Nina would only make things worse. He needed to show that he meant no harm. Ethan slowly walked back to the cabin. He opened the door carefully and looked inside. Nina was awake. She was sitting on the bed, holding her cloth. She looked frightened when she saw Ethan. Ethan spoke softly to her. He pointed to the door and then pointed to the people outside. He made a motion like walking. He wanted to show her that they were outside and that she needed to come out. Nina looked at Ethan and shook her head. She did not want to go outside. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. Ethan understood her fear. He knew that the people outside might be her family, but he also knew that she had been through a lot. She might not trust them yet. Ethan gently placed his hand on her shoulder. He spoke softly, using simple words. "They want to see you," he said. "They are not here to hurt you. I think they want to bring you home." Nina looked at Ethan. She seemed to think for a moment. Then she slowly nodded. She stood up carefully and walked to the door. Ethan followed her. He opened the door and stepped outside with her. The cold night air hit them both. Nina shivered. Ethan held her hand gently. He wanted to show her that he was with her. He walked toward the campfire, and the people around the fire watched them closely. When Nina reached the fire, she stopped. She looked at the people. She looked at their faces. Some of them looked serious. Some of them looked worried. Some of them looked relieved. Nina's eyes moved from one face to another. She looked like she was trying to recognize someone. Then one of the women in the group stood up. She looked at Nina with a strong expression. She stepped forward slowly. When she got close, Nina's eyes widened. She looked like she had recognized her. The woman spoke softly to Nina. Nina's face changed. She looked like she was trying to understand. Then Nina's eyes filled with tears. She ran forward and hugged the woman tightly. The woman hugged her back. Ethan stood back, watching. He felt a strange feeling in his chest. He felt happy for Nina, but he also felt a little left out. He realized that Nina's family had finally found her. He realized that he had done something important. He had helped her. The older man walked toward Ethan. He looked at Ethan with a serious expression. Ethan waited. He did not know what the man would say. Then the older man spoke. He pointed to Nina and then pointed to Ethan. He made a motion like a heart. He was saying that Ethan had helped Nina. He was thanking him. Ethan felt a deep relief. The older man then pointed to the sky and made a motion like the sun rising. He was saying that Ethan had done something good. He was saying that Ethan had saved Nina's life. Ethan nodded. He felt a sense of pride. He had never thought that his life would matter to anyone. He had never thought that he would be seen as someone who could help others. But now he realized that his actions had meaning. The group began to talk quietly among themselves. Ethan could not understand their words, but he could feel the emotion in their voices. They were not angry. They were grateful. They were relieved. Nina's family invited Ethan to sit by the fire. They offered him food. Ethan accepted. He sat down and ate slowly. He listened to their stories, even though he could not understand them. He watched their faces. He watched their expressions. He felt connected to them in a way he had never felt before. As the night went on, the group began to prepare to leave. They gathered their belongings and prepared their horses. Nina's family told Ethan that they would take her home. Ethan understood. He felt a sense of sadness. He had grown attached to Nina. He had cared for her. He had helped her. He did not want to say goodbye. Nina walked over to Ethan. She looked at him and held his hand. She did not want to leave. Ethan looked at her and smiled. He wanted to tell her that she was safe now. He wanted to tell her that she could go home. Nina nodded. She looked at Ethan one last time. Then she turned and walked toward her family. She climbed onto a horse and the group began to move away. Ethan watched them disappear into the darkness. He stood alone again. He looked at the empty land. He felt a deep sense of quiet. He felt the wind in his face. He felt the world around him. He knew that his life would never be the same. He had helped someone and that someone had changed his life. He had learned that he could make a difference. He had learned that he could care for someone. Ethan went back to his cabin. He sat by the fire and thought about the night. He thought about Nina's smile. He thought about her family. He thought about the way they had thanked him. He thought about how the world was connected in ways he had never understood. Ethan felt a new sense of purpose. He realized that he was not truly alone. He realized that even in the quiet land, people could find each other. He realized that kindness could create strong connections. As the night ended, Ethan looked out at the land. He felt a sense of peace. He knew that the next day would come and he would continue his life, but he also knew that something had changed. He had opened his heart to someone else. He had learned that being alone did not mean being empty. Ethan closed his eyes and fell asleep, feeling the quiet land around him. He knew that he had done something important. He knew that he had made a difference, and he knew that he would never forget Nina. After Nina left with her family, Ethan felt the land around him change. The ranch suddenly felt quiet in a different way. Before, it was quiet because it was empty. Now it was quiet because something important had ended. He had helped someone, and that help had come with a cost. He felt a small emptiness, like a piece of his life had been taken away. Ethan tried to return to his usual routine. He fed the cattle, checked the fences, and fixed the broken posts. The work was familiar, and it gave him a sense of comfort. But his thoughts kept drifting back to Nina. He wondered how she was doing. He wondered if she had reached home safely. He wondered if her family had treated her kindly. Days passed. The land remained calm and the weather stayed warm. Ethan began to think that maybe the world was returning to normal. Maybe Nina's story was over and he could go back to his quiet life. But one evening, as the sun began to set, Ethan noticed something strange. He was sitting near the fence, watching the cattle, when he saw dust rising in the distance. At first, he thought it was just the wind, But the dust grew larger, and Ethan realized that it was caused by a group of horses. Ethan stood up slowly and watched. The horses were moving quickly toward his ranch. Ethan felt a familiar feeling in his chest. He felt the same tension he had felt the night Nina arrived. He knew that something was coming. Ethan walked back to his cabin and looked around. He grabbed his rifle and a lantern. He did not know what to expect. He did not want to assume anything. He only knew that he had to be prepared. The horses were getting closer. Ethan could see that there were many of them. He could not count them, but it looked like a large group. He could see the riders on the horses moving steadily toward the ranch. They were not moving in a rush. They were moving with purpose. Ethan felt his heart beat faster. He stood near the door of his cabin, waiting. He wanted to see who they were. He wanted to know why they were coming. As the group reached the edge of his property, Ethan could see them more clearly. They were dressed in traditional clothing. They looked like they belonged to the same group that had visited before. Ethan's mind raced. He wondered if they were Nina's people. He wondered if they were coming to thank him again. He wondered if they were coming to ask for help. Ethan stepped outside and raised his hands in a calm gesture. He wanted to show that he meant no harm. The group stopped and looked at him. The leader, the older man from before, stepped forward. Ethan felt a small sense of relief. He recognized the man. He remembered the way the man had looked at him before. He remembered the way he had thanked him. Ethan thought that maybe everything would be peaceful. But the older man did not smile. He looked serious. He looked like he was carrying a heavy weight. He spoke to Ethan, but Ethan could not understand the words. The man pointed toward the cabin and then pointed to the sky. He was asking Ethan to come closer. Ethan walked toward the man, keeping his hands visible. He wanted to show respect. He did not want to cause any misunderstanding. The man spoke again, pointing to the cabin and then pointing to Nina. Ethan understood. The man was asking about Nina. He wanted to know if Nina was safe. Ethan nodded and pointed to himself. He then pointed to the cabin and made a motion like a heart. He was trying to say that he had helped Nina. He was trying to say that she was safe. The older man watched Ethan carefully. He seemed to be thinking. Then he pointed to the ground and made a motion like walking. He was asking Ethan to follow him. Ethan hesitated. He did not know where the man wanted to go, but he also knew that he could not refuse. He wanted to show that he respected the man and his people. Ethan followed the older man. The group moved toward the cabin. They walked slowly with purpose. Ethan felt the weight of their eyes on him. He felt like he was being watched. When they reached the cabin, the older man spoke to Ethan again. He pointed to the door and then pointed to the sky. He was asking Ethan to open the door. Ethan opened the door slowly. The group looked inside. They saw the empty room. They saw the bed where Nina had slept. They saw the small objects she had left behind. The older man looked at the room for a moment. Then he turned to Ethan and pointed to the ground. He made a motion like the sun rising. He was saying that time had passed. He was saying that Nina had left. He was saying that she was gone. Ethan felt a new wave of worry. He wondered why they had returned. He wondered if they were angry. He wondered if they were upset that Nina had stayed at Ethan's cabin. He did not know. The older man spoke again. This time he pointed to his chest and then pointed to Ethan. He was saying that he wanted to talk. He was saying that he wanted to share something important. Ethan nodded. The older man led Ethan to a small area near the cabin. He sat down on the ground and gestured for Ethan to sit too. Ethan sat carefully. The group remained nearby, watching quietly. The older man reached into a bag and pulled out a small object. It was a piece of cloth, similar to the one Nina had kept. Ethan recognized it immediately. It was the same pattern. It was Nina's cloth. Ethan's heart beat faster. He looked at the cloth. He felt a strong emotion. He felt sadness and he felt hope. He felt like the cloth was a sign. It was a sign that Nina was safe. The older man spoke again. He pointed to the cloth and then pointed to Nina. He was telling Ethan that Nina had returned home safely. He was telling Ethan that she had reached her family. He was telling Ethan that she was alive. Ethan felt a deep relief. He felt like a heavy weight had been lifted from his chest. He smiled. He felt tears in his eyes, but he did not let them fall. He was not used to showing emotion. The older man saw Ethan's expression. He nodded. He seemed pleased. He then pointed to the sky and made a motion like a circle. He was saying that Ethan had done something good. He was saying that Ethan had helped Nina. Ethan felt proud. He felt like he had done something important. He felt like he had made a difference in someone's life. He looked at the older man and nodded. The older man then stood up and spoke to the group. He pointed to Ethan and then pointed to the cabin. He was telling the group about Ethan's kindness. He was telling them that Ethan had helped Nina when she needed it most. The group listened quietly. They looked at Ethan with respect. Ethan felt a strange feeling. He felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. He felt like he belonged to a community even if he did not live among them. The older man then made a gesture with his hands. He pointed to the sky and then pointed to the land. He was saying that the land belonged to everyone. He was saying that people could share it. He was saying that kindness could connect people. Ethan listened carefully. He felt the truth in the older man's words. He had always thought that the land was his alone. He had thought that living alone meant owning the land. But now he realized that the land was shared by many people. He realized that his life was connected to others, even if he did not see them every day. The older man then spoke again. He pointed to Ethan and then pointed to his own chest. He was saying that Ethan was a friend. Ethan nodded. The group stayed for a while longer. They shared food with Ethan. They spoke softly, even though Ethan could not understand the words. They smiled at him. They showed him respect. As the sun began to rise, the group prepared to leave. Nina's family thanked Ethan again. The older man shook Ethan's hand. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. He knew that he had earned their respect. The group rode away, leaving Ethan alone again. Ethan watched them disappear into the distance. He felt a sense of peace. He felt like he had done something meaningful. Ethan returned to his cabin. He sat by the fire and thought about the visit. He thought about the older man's words. He thought about the idea that the land belonged to everyone. He thought about how kindness could connect people. Ethan realized that his life had changed. He had always been a loner, but now he knew that he could be part of something bigger. He knew that he could help others and that his actions could matter. The land was quiet again, but it felt different. It felt like a place where stories could begin. It felt like a place where people could meet, even if they came from different worlds. Ethan closed his eyes and fell asleep, feeling the quiet land around him. He knew that he would never forget Nina. He knew that he would never forget the night the group came to his ranch. And he knew that his life would never be the same again. The days after Nina's family left passed slowly but peacefully. Ethan returned to his normal routine, tending the ranch, checking fences, and caring for the cattle. The wide, open land stretched endlessly around him, calm and quiet as ever, yet something inside Ethan had changed. He felt lighter, more connected to the world, even though he was alone again. The memory of Nina's smile and the gratitude in her family's eyes stayed with him, reminding him of the power of kindness. Ethan began to notice the little things around the ranch more than before. The soft rustling of the wind through the tall grass, the bright yellow flowers that grew near the stream, the way the cattle moved in calm patterns across the fields, it all seemed more alive. He realized that life on the ranch was never just about survival or chores. It was about appreciating the quiet beauty in every moment. Helping Nina had awakened something in him he hadn't known existed. Some mornings, Ethan would walk to the edge of his land and look at the hills in the distance. He thought about the journey Nina had made to reach her home. He imagined the rivers she had crossed, the forests she had walked through, and the people who had guided her safely. He marveled at her courage. Even though she was small and fragile, she had endured so much, and now she was back where she belonged. He smiled at the thought. She had survived and she had thrived. That made Ethan feel proud in a way he hadn't felt in years. Despite the quiet, Ethan also felt a little emptiness. Nina had been a part of his life even for a short time, and suddenly she was gone. He missed her presence, the way she had learned English words from his notebook, the way she had shown him words from her own language. He missed the laughter that had bubbled up when they discovered a new way to understand each other. Though it had been difficult at first, their bond had grown strong. And now, it felt like a chapter of his life had closed, leaving only memories behind. One evening, as Ethan tended the horses in the stable, he noticed movement on the ridge above the ranch. At first, he thought it might be the wind playing tricks on his eyes, but then he saw a familiar figure walking down the slope. It was a young girl, Nina. But she was not alone. A few of her family members were with her, moving carefully and smiling. Ethan's heart leapt. He did not expect to see them again so soon. Nina spotted Ethan and ran toward him, her face lighting up with excitement. "Ethan," she called, using the name she had learned with such effort. Her voice carried across the fields, pure and joyful. Ethan dropped the bucket he had been carrying and ran to meet her. She reached him and threw her arms around him in a warm hug. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. All the worries, the loneliness, and the hardships of the past weeks melted away in that embrace. "I wanted to see you again," Nina said softly, stepping back to look at him. Her eyes shone with happiness. Ethan smiled and nodded. He could see that she had grown stronger since the day he had found her in the ravine. Her face was healthier, her posture more confident, and there was a glow of contentment that came from being home with her family, but also from knowing she had a friend in Ethan. Nina's family approached slowly. The older man, whom Ethan had met before, stepped forward and gave him a respectful nod. The other family members also smiled and waved. Ethan realized that their visit was not just about Nina. It was about gratitude, respect, and friendship. He felt honored. He had made a difference in their lives, and now they had come to show appreciation in the way their hearts knew how. They spent the evening together near the fire outside Ethan's cabin. Nina's family shared stories of their village, of the rivers and hills where Nina had grown up. They talked about festivals, dances, and celebrations. Ethan listened intently, even though he did not understand every word. He watched Nina laugh as her family told tales that seemed magical and full of wonder. He realized that this was a gift for him too, a window into a world he had never known. Ethan also shared stories from his life on the ranch. He told them about the long days spent caring for the cattle, the storms he had faced, and the quiet nights under the stars. Nina and her family listened with fascination. Though the worlds they had grown up in were very different, they could understand the emotions behind his words, the joy of hard work, the challenges of solitude, and the love for the land. As the night deepened, the stars filled the sky. Ethan noticed how Nina and her family gazed upward, pointing at constellations and sharing their names in their language. Ethan tried to learn a few, repeating the words slowly and carefully. They laughed when he mispronounced some of them, and Ethan laughed too. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly connected, not only to Nina and her family, but to the universe itself. The following days brought more warmth and happiness. Nina's family stayed on the ranch for a while, helping Ethan with chores and learning about his daily life. Ethan taught them how to milk cows, mend fences, and ride horses safely. In return, they taught him more words in their language, shared songs, and showed him how to make small crafts from wood and cloth. Each day was filled with learning, laughter, and shared effort. Ethan felt a joy he had never known before, one that came from being part of a community, even if only for a short time. Through these experiences, Ethan noticed something important about himself. He realized that his life on the ranch did not have to be lonely. He had always thought that solitude was the only way to live, that the wide land was meant only for one person. But now he understood that kindness and openness could bring people together, even in the most remote places. Friendship and trust could grow in the most unexpected ways, creating bonds stronger than any fear or distance. One morning, Ethan woke before sunrise. He stepped outside and watched the light spread across the hills. The air was crisp and fresh. He thought about how much had changed in such a short time, about how a single act of helping a small girl had brought him friends, gratitude, and a sense of belonging. He felt a deep calm. His heart was full. He knew that his life would continue to be quiet and simple, but it would also be richer than before. Nina appeared beside him, holding a small basket of fresh herbs she had gathered. "Good morning, Ethan," she said softly. Ethan smiled and nodded. Together, they walked through the fields, gathering food for breakfast. Their conversation was simple but joyful, filled with laughter and curiosity. Ethan marveled at how much she had grown, how much stronger she had become, and how resilient her spirit was. He realized that her courage had inspired him as much as he had helped her. Days turned into weeks. Nina and her family eventually returned to their village, but not before leaving a permanent mark on Ethan's life. They gave him gifts of small handmade items, tokens of appreciation and respect. They promised to visit again, and Ethan promised to visit them someday. More than that, they left behind the memory of a connection that transcended distance, language, and culture, a reminder that caring for another person could create bonds that last forever. Ethan returned to his daily life on the ranch with a new perspective. He continued to tend the land, care for the animals, and maintain his routines, but now each day felt meaningful in a deeper way. He knew that life was not only about survival or work. It was about the relationships we form, the kindness we show, and the courage to help those in need. He felt gratitude for the quiet land that had given him both solitude and opportunity, and for the chance encounter that had changed his life. On quiet nights, Ethan would sit by the fire and think about Nina. He remembered the day he found her in the ravine, weak and frightened. He remembered teaching her words, sharing food, and guiding her back to strength. He remembered the night her family had arrived, their gratitude shining in their eyes. Each memory filled him with warmth, a reminder that one act of compassion could ripple through time, affecting more lives than he could ever imagine. Ethan's heart was no longer lonely. He had learned that even in isolation, one could make a difference. He had learned that bravery did not always mean facing danger alone. It could also mean helping someone vulnerable, showing patience, and offering kindness. He had discovered that true strength lay in empathy, understanding, and the willingness to connect with another person. Seasons changed on the ranch. Spring brought green grass and blooming flowers, summer brought long, warm days, autumn brought golden leaves, and winter brought the stillness of snow-covered fields. Through all the changes, Ethan carried the lessons he had learned with Nina. Every sunrise reminded him that life was full of possibilities, and every starry night reminded him that connections could be found in the most unexpected places. Years later, Ethan would still think of Nina with a smile. He would remember her courage, her laughter, and the bond they had formed. And though they lived far apart, he knew that the connection they shared, born from a single act of compassion, would never fade. It had shaped him, strengthened him, and taught him that even one person can make a profound difference in the world. The ranch remained his sanctuary, the wide-open land his home. But Ethan no longer felt truly alone. He carried the memory of Nina and her family in his heart, a reminder that kindness, courage, and love are timeless. He understood now that life's greatest reward is not wealth or solitude, but the bonds we form, the lives we touch, and the legacy of compassion we leave behind. And on quiet nights, when the wind whispered through the grass and the stars shone brightly above, Ethan would look toward the horizon, imagining Nina safe and happy, and he would smile. He would know that helping her had changed both their lives forever, and that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can create the largest impact.